Number 10, rapping about a scam. Fontrell Antonio Baines, aka Nuke Bizzle, is a 31-year-old Memphis-based rapper that recently caught the attention of the feds when he foolishly bragged about committing a crime in a music video. Bizzle got rich when he scammed the government out of hundreds of thousands of dollars in the COVID relief assistance programs. Upon investigation, it was discovered that he had fraudulently obtained a whopping $1.2 million in unemployment benefits in the state of California, where he was residing at the time he carried out the scam. The Department of Justice accused Bizzle of possessing and using at least 92 preloaded debit cards that were obtained with unemployment applications, and all 92 of those cards had addresses connected to various places the rapper somehow had access to. He wasn't the only one involved, though. Several co-conspirators allegedly used the debit cards to purchase material items and even withdrew $704,000 in cash from ATMs. And then Bizzle broke the number one rule by admitting what he and his fellow scammers did in a song called EDD, which is an abbreviation for California's Employment Development Department. In the music video, Bizzle and his fellow rappers can be seen holding envelopes from the agency and bragging about how instead of selling drugs, they just file a claim. Towards the end of 2020, the feds caught up with Bizzle while he was in Las Vegas and charged him with aggravated identity theft, access device fraud, and interstate transportation of stolen property. The trial is still going on, and if Nuke Bizzle is convicted on all counts, he could face up to 22 years in jail. Number 9, Trophy Hunter. In 2018, Blake Fisher made the mistake of sending trophy hunting photos to over 100 people from his work email address. What makes it even worse at the time? He was the Fish and Game Commissioner for the state of Idaho. The disturbing photos show Fisher and his wife and at least 14 dead animals that they shot and killed during a trip to Namibia. Fisher even included captions with the pictures, including one that read, "So I shot a whole family of baboons." The tragic image showed the blood-covered victims, including a baby baboon with its head resting on the mom baboon's chest. The couple also killed a giraffe, leopard, antelope, impala, warthog, and more. The photos soon went viral, sparking widespread outrage among animal rights activists and conservationists. Longtime hunters were also furious, claiming that Fisher's bragging was unethical. Some of the man's colleagues even called on him to resign from his position as Fish and Game Commissioner. Fisher would argue that he didn't do anything illegal, but his actions were seen as incredibly distasteful, especially considering his high-ranking position as a wildlife official. The disgraced trophy hunter did eventually quit his job, but he never apologized for his actions in a resignation letter he sent to the Idaho governor. However, he did admit to using poor judgment, showing poor sportsmanship, and failing to respect the animals that he killed. Number 8, Young Lovers. 16-year-old Sierra Halseth and her boyfriend, 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, thought that they were madly in love, but Sierra's father Daniel forbade them from seeing each other. Sierra and Aaron were determined to be together though, and believed killing Daniel was their only choice for that to happen. In April of 2022, Daniel's body was found dismembered in his home, which had been set on fire. Family members had trouble contacting Sierra, and soon enough, the teen and her boyfriend became the prime suspects in Daniel's murder. Surveillance footage showed the couple buying bleach, gloves, lighter fluid, and a circular saw in the days leading up to the crime. Immediately after the killing, the pair recorded videos for their YouTube channel, boasting about how they had murdered and attempted to dismember Daniel. In one video, they said, quote, "It was worth it." After foolishly confessing to the heinous crime, they also bragged about how they'd had sex multiple times that day, as if their actions came secondary to their selfish pleasures. The young murderous lovers didn't get away with it for very long. They'd stolen Daniel's car, and police caught up with them in Salt Lake City, Utah. Sierra was charged as an adult, despite being just 16 years old. She was spared the death penalty, but Aaron might not be as lucky because he was legally an adult when the murder happened. At last update, the teens pleaded not guilty, but honestly, there's too much evidence for them to get away with it. Number 7, CELLMATE confession. In July 2009, 20-year-old Amanda Snell failed to report to her duties at a military base residence in Arlington, Virginia, and police decided to perform a welfare check. They discovered Amanda dead inside of a closet. An autopsy determined that someone had strangled her. Detectives suspected that the killer lived on base since it would have been difficult for a civilian to get past security. They took DNA samples from the crime scene but didn't get any results for months. A year later, 3 young women were kidnapped in Arlington. They were bound with electrical cords and were held at gunpoint inside their apartment. The kidnapper took one of the women to a remote area where he beat her, then just left her to die on the side of the road. Luckily, all 3 women survived, and they provided authorities with enough information about their attacker and even the vehicle he was driving, which led police to a suspect, Jorge Avila Torres. He was a soldier stationed at the base where Amanda was brutally murdered the year before. In fact, he lived just 2 doors down from her. Evidence found inside his car linking him to the kidnapping, and DNA connected him to Amanda as well. Avila Torres was arrested for his crimes and taken to jail. Now, you'd think if he really wanted to get away with what he had done, he would keep quiet. But he didn't. Instead, he bragged to his cellmate about killing Amanda Snell. The cellmate was doing time for serious fraud and thinking he would get some time shaved off his sentence, so he went to authorities with this information. He agreed to wear a wire and captured disturbing audio of Avila Torres talking about how he tied Amanda up and choked her to death. Avila Torres was convicted of the murder. DNA evidence further revealed that he had committed a double homicide in his hometown of Zion, Illinois back in 2005. He was a teenager when he killed 2 victims and cut their eyes out of their sockets. It's almost as though Avila Torres joined the military to evade suspicion. He pled guilty to the 2005 murders and was sentenced to death. Number 6. Boosting numbers. Ruben Carvalho was a career criminal and commander of a group of street-level drug dealers in Cardiff, Wales. He ran a lucrative drug operation that saw a 6-figure profit over a 4-month span between 2019 and early 2020. But when his runners started getting arrested, Carvalho became short-staffed, forcing him to carry out some low-level sales on his own, that he wouldn't normally do. Through these interactions, he unknowingly sold crack cocaine and heroin to undercover officers on 2 separate occasions. During one conversation, he bragged to the undercover cop about how he was making 3,000 pounds a day until his runners started getting arrested. Carvalho went on to say that his profits had dropped significantly and even asked the officer to give his number out to friends so that he could get more business. Soon, he was busted for his illegal activities as part of a police initiative called Operation Talon. By then, Carvalho already had drug-related convictions from previous offenses. He pleaded guilty to supplying an intent to supply Class A drugs and is currently awaiting sentencing. Number 5. Money in dog breeding. In Port St. Lucie, Florida, a dog breeder recently found himself face-to-face with 3 home intruders after unwisely bragging on social media about how much money he was making with his business. The home invaders posed as customers who were interested in buying puppies. When they were let into the house, they robbed the dog breeder, kidnapped him, and forced him to drive to various locations and ATMs. While driving down the street, the dog breeder noticed a police vehicle parked on the side of the road and purposely drove erratically to try to get the cop to pull him over. And it worked. When the officer asked for his license and registration, he noticed the driver was clearly uncomfortable and saw a hand gesture and a look of despair on his face, indicating that he was in danger. Inside the vehicle, officers found guns, knives, and a large sum of cash. The suspects, Sadiqil Sellers, Kavia Bragnon, and Ben Vial Radcliffe, are facing a long list of charges, including unlicensed carrying of a firearm, kidnapping, assault, home invasion, possession of a controlled substance, providing a false name, false imprisonment, and witness tampering. All 3 men are currently behind bars waiting for their next court date. Number 4. Trap House Homicides. In 2007, 16-year-old Christopher Horton and his friend 20-year-old Brian Dean were shot dead on a front porch in Newport News, Virginia. The double homicide went cold and remained unsolved for years. Finally, in 2013, police caught a break when they received a tip that Antoine Tween Gotti Stewart rapped about the crime in his song Ride Out. The disturbing lyrics, which appeared on YouTube in 2011, mentioned killing someone on a trap house porch at midnight. This, along with other clues, made Tween Gotti the main suspect in the killing of Christopher and Brian. Police charged the then 22-year-old with 2 counts of felony murder, 1 count of unlawfully discharging a firearm, and 2 counts of using a firearm to commit a felony. Investigators believe that Tween Gotti shot his victims after an argument he had with them earlier that day. And while they had suspected him of being involved all along, they didn't have sufficient evidence to arrest him until the tip came in about his self-incriminating song. Tween Gotti was tried as a juvenile because he was a minor when he allegedly committed the murders. He pleaded not guilty and managed to avoid a conviction for the double murder charge, but was convicted of multiple other offenses and ultimately sentenced to 16 years behind bars, which really doesn't seem long enough for murdering 2 young men in cold blood. Number 3. Marketing skills. In late 2020, police in Swansea, Wales followed a suspicious white van that they later determined had been stolen from an Amazon delivery driver and had fake plates attached to it. After losing sight of the vehicle for a short time, they found it again in a park with 2 men nearby. The suspects tried to run, but officers soon caught up with 24-year-old Nikki Hall. When officers looked at the man's phone, they found all kinds of texts about selling drugs and even several videos showing drug-related footage, including clips of people weighing, packaging, and using illegal substances. It turned out that the videos were advertisements for drugs that Hall was attempting to sell. There was even a video of Hall bragging about the quality of his cocaine supply, stating, quote, "Got the white that will make you fly like a kite," end quote. Cops weren't as impressed with Hall's marketing skills as his customers probably were, especially when they found a bag full of drugs that he had ditched after seeing that he was being followed by the law. He was released amid an ongoing investigation but wound up getting arrested again a few months later after he was caught with more drugs. Hall's lawyer claimed that the man's life spiraled out of control after he got in a motorcycle accident in 2020. After spending weeks in the hospital with bills stacking up, he got involved with the wrong crowd and turned to the criminal lifestyle. The judge didn't feel sorry for him, though, and sentenced Hall to 3.5 years in prison. Number 2, walking for the holidays. On Christmas Eve in 2017 in Riviera Beach, Florida, 2 pregnant 19-year-olds were sitting in a car together when a woman tried to attack them with a crowbar and a taser. The pregnant girls took off in the car, but the crazy lady started chasing them in her own vehicle. The pursuit ended when the attacker crashed into the victim's car. Police reported to the scene and decided not to arrest the suspect, 23-year-old Antisha Andrea Brown. A few days later, one of the pregnant victims saw that Brown was bragging about destroying their car and making them, quote, walk for the holidays on social media. She contacted police and told them about what she had seen, at which point, cops changed their minds and picked up the suspect on charges of aggravated battery with a weapon and aggravated battery of 2 known pregnant women. Brown was held without bond at the Palm Beach County Jail while she awaited to face allegations against her. A few months later, she ended up receiving a 2-year prison sentence for unrelated crimes, including identity fraud and illegal possession of a debit or credit card. She was released in October 2019. Number 1, senseless fighting. A teenager named Ethan Liming was beaten to death recently outside a school in Akron, Ohio. He was playing basketball with some friends when another group of young men approached them and allegedly started firing a water gun at them. A fight broke out and Ethan was left dead on the pavement. The attackers fled the scene and initially got away with the murder, leading police to appeal to the public for any information. Witnesses came forward and claimed that brothers Deshaun and Tyler Stafford and their cousin Donovan Jones had bragged about killing Ethan. All 3 are currently being held on charges of murder and felonious assault. Akron Police Chief Steve Milet acknowledged in a statement that while he believed the victim's family would welcome the news of the arrest, nothing could bring young Ethan back. The police chief condemned the worsening problem of violence in the country and called for an end to the senseless acts that are taking innocent lives in alarming numbers across the country. Number 10, Victoria Falls Nightmare. Erin Langworthy is extremely lucky to be alive after her bungee cord snapped and she was dropped into crocodile-infested waters. The 22-year-old Australian woman wanted to celebrate the fact that she had just graduated college and went to visit Africa. On her journey, she decided to cross bungee jumping off her bucket list. She was traveling alone but joined a tour group to Victoria Falls in Namibia where they would jump off a 365-foot or just over 110-meter bridge with the thundering falls behind them. She was nervous to leap off a perfectly good bridge, but she thought, hey, what could go wrong? Well, a lot could go wrong. And it did. Erin felt a tremendous jolt coursing through her chest when she was free-falling. She braced herself for the bounce back up, but instead she hit the water full force. Prior to striking the river's surface, she reflexively raised her arms to her face, which was the only reason she didn't black out. But the nightmare wasn't over. The water was full of crocodiles, and she remembered seeing plenty that morning. The current was strong and started to pull her downriver. She fought to breathe and thought her lungs were on fire. She struggled to keep her head above water since her legs were still chained together. At one point, the cord got caught on something and she was trapped below the surface. Somehow, she managed to dive down and pull herself free. 40 minutes had passed before she had finally pulled herself from the river and had been saved. Erin later found out that the cord ripped after falling for just 4 seconds. She fell from 130 feet up, or just about 40 meters. If she wasn't above the water, she surely would have died. The cause of the terrible accident was simple wear and tear on the cord from hundreds of bungee jumps from that bridge each year. She had amazingly survived both the tremendous fall and the deadly river. Her body was badly bruised and she fractured her collarbone, but she was alive. After spending a week in the hospital in South Africa, she was released. Number 9. Russian Daredevil. As if jumping off a bridge with only an elastic rope attached to your feet isn't crazy enough, a Russian daredevil decided to do it while hooked on by piercings on his butt. Yup, you heard that right. The cringeworthy stunt happened in St. Petersburg in March 2021. The man's name is Aid Adov, and he jumped off what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse some 50 feet or just about 15 meters in the air. He plunged towards the concrete floor before the rope pulled tight. He let out a disturbing scream as the tension was taken up by 4 metal rods passing through his buttocks. Then he just kinda swung back and forth, suspended only by 2 piercings in each butt cheek. When Adov posted the stunt, he explained the motivation behind it, saying, quote, he was an extremist who wanted to feel the whole range of existing pain sensations, end quote. And we're sure he did. He either wasn't aware of how much he was risking or he just didn't care. Adov claimed that he was the first Russian brave enough to attempt the stunt and only the second in the world. He now has numerous fans that can't wait for his next risky video. And if it's as dangerous as this one, he could be in for a world of pain. No buts about that. Number 8. Death of a Rising Star. Amber Bellows was only 28 years old when she died in a base jumping incident at Zion National Park in Utah in 2014. Bellows was a rising star of the extreme sport, but no one could have predicted that her wingsuit would fail and she would ultimately fall nearly 2,000 feet or just over 600 meters. Her husband of just 2 weeks and base jumping partner, 29-year-old Clayton Butler, told officials that they had hiked up to Mount Kenesawa, a rugged route in the southwestern corner of Zion. The Salt Lake City couple were said to be experienced base jumpers, in which participants leap from fixed objects such as mountains or buildings, using parachutes to slow their falls. Butler could see that his wife's parachute didn't deploy correctly, and he dived after her, but tragically, he couldn't reach her in time. Bellows' death was the first ever base jumper fatality in Zion National Park. The risky activity is actually illegal within the park. Despite this ban, though, base jumpers flock to the park every year to partake in the sport within the premises, though thankfully no one had gotten hurt before this. Mount Kenesawa itself is a region that is not regularly maintained, and it isn't recommended to visit. Due to the difficult terrain of the area, the search team couldn't locate her body until the next morning. Using a helicopter, they were able to hoist her broken body to a nearby waiting ambulance. Number 7. Feet first. Rishi Baveha is a British citizen who survived a botched bungee jump from 165 or just about 50 meters. Despite the fact that the bungee jumping service operator had a perfect safety record of 100%, a nervous Rishi said a prayer and made the leap from the tall tower in Thailand. As Rishi put his arms out and jumped feet first toward the green water far below, he had no idea what a rush his first bungee jump would actually turn out to be. When he came to the end of the bungee cord, it snapped away from his feet and he smashed chest first into the waters at a speed of about 80 miles per hour or just under 130 kilometers per hour. If Rishi had hit headfirst, he surely would have been killed or at least suffered severe brain damage. Instead, with his chest taking the brunt of the impact, he came away with 2 collapsed lungs, a torn liver, and a ruptured spleen, among other injuries. He then spent a month in the hospital recovering, and will go through the rest of his life without his spleen, which had to be removed. In the subsequent investigation, there was some debate about the instruction Rishi got before he jumped. He said the instructor just told him to put his arms out and leap. The company Jungle Bungee Jump, which claimed 17 years of accident-free operation before the jump, said Rishi was supposed to go off head first and not feet first. According to the company, by leading with his feet, Rishi made the bungee cord detach. Regardless of who was to blame, Rishi chose not to play the finger-pointing game and not to sue the corporation, while also not renouncing high adrenaline pursuits in the future. He said that his brush with death has given him a brand new appreciation for life. Number 6. Grandpa Base Jumper. A senior citizen in Virginia has proved that you're never too old to do something crazy. Police arrested 70-year-old Chuck Moser for doing several insane base jumps off of a random tall building. One of them was the Tyson's Corner building, just 360 feet or over 110 meters tall. Police originally suspected him of doing 6 base jumps off of all the tallest buildings in Virginia back in 2008 and 2019. But by the time the police could build up a case against him, the statute of limitations had already expired. But in 2021, the Fairfax County Police were finally able to arrest him on 3 counts of misdemeanor trespassing. This is because between 2020 and 2021, he went on to do more base jumps around Northern Virginia. One of the jumps was from the Capital One campus. Even more ludicrous, and actually pretty funny, is that Chuck has denied all the allegations against him, claiming the charges are ridiculous. He says the police have no proof he did anything, except that there's a video of him jumping off the Tyson's Corner building. When asked about it, Chuck said it wasn't him, and because they can't actually confirm his face or his fingerprints, they had to drop the charges. Chuck is a former military man who operated with the Army's 101st Airborne Division, specializing in air assaults. It seems Chuck still loves jumping even after his Army days, and even if he's 70 years old. Would you let your grandpa base jump? Would you be able to stop him? Let us know in the comments and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 5. Skyline Wedding. In 2018, a groomsman took the saying break a leg a little too seriously when he went ahead and actually broke his leg. It happened after he crashed into the side of a cliff during a base jump gone horribly wrong. The man was attending a bizarre skyline wedding. This is when the people tie the knot on a net strung between some cliffs, some 107 meters or 350 feet above the ground. It's a pretty wild ceremony. It was being held in Moab, Utah. The groomsmen launched themselves off the cliff just before the wedding vows were supposed to be recited. But for one unlucky groomsman, he ended up crashing into the side of the cliff, tumbling down to the ground and fracturing both of his legs. Even though the fall injured the groomsmen, the show must go on. Even with one man getting lifted off to the hospital, the ridiculous wedding in the sky continued. David Lafargue, the quote, flower girl, jumped off the canyon with a trail of petals floating behind him. Number 4. Katie Connell. Katie Connell was a base jumper whose tragic final leap was recorded by her companion's GoPro in January 2016. She died during a 300-foot or just over 90-meter jump from Bixby Bridge in Big Sur, California, after missing her landing target and getting swept away by a wave. Her companion, Finnish skydiving instructor Rami Kajala, had over 2,500 jumps under his belt. He jumped after her in an attempt to save Connell and ended up drowning himself. The pair was presumed dead after the footage of Connell's last leap was found on the beach. The 30-year-old Knoxville, Tennessee native had been living in Ventura, California with a family's friend while on a nursing contract for a few months. She used to work regularly as a travel nurse and loved skydiving, base jumping, travel, and adventure. Connell had actually started skydiving as a method to get over her fear of flying. Her friends expressed that she knew the risks of the extreme sport and she always took necessary precautions. She was known as an inspiring person and took joy in spreading her own love of adventure. Number 3. The Late Late Breakfast Show. In the mid-1980s, the BBC's The Late Late Breakfast Show was recognized for doing some of the most dangerous stunts on British television. This involved rescuing someone from an exploding chimney by helicopter, attempting a 230-foot or 70-meter car jump, and performing a human cannonball stunt. All of these ended horribly, but the most tragic of all was the death of Michael Lush in 1986. He died while rehearsing a live stunt called Hang 'em High, which entailed jumping from an explosive box hanging from a 120-foot or 37-meter crane. Lush fell to his death after the carabiner clasp that held his bungee cable to the crane snapped. He died instantaneously as a result of various injuries. This led to an immediate cancellation of the show. The production crew was subsequently accused of many safety infractions. One of the tests in the investigation found that the carabiner sprung loose 14 times out of 20 under the weight of a bag of sugar. Number 2. Long Rope. A bungee jumper recently fell to his death after jumping off a bridge in Sao Paulo, Brazil. The tragedy happened because the rope was too long. The victim's name is Fabio Ezequiel de Morales, and he went bungee jumping with his wife, his brother, and his young son. His whole family witnessed the moment he slapped the ground and cracked like an egg. Obviously, no one could have anticipated what was going to happen. Everyone was excited and cheering, and they were waiting for him to bounce back. The screaming didn't start until that final second when everyone realized he was going to hit the ground. Fabio was immediately rushed to the hospital, but there was nothing they could do to save him. He was pronounced dead as soon as he got there. But there is a silver lining. Fabio had actually planned to take his son on the jump with him, but at the very last moment, he changed his mind and chose to do the jump alone. The sudden change of heart saved his son's life. Number 1. Adrenaline Mom. A thrill-seeking mother of 3 died after falling 82 feet or 25 meters after a communication breakdown caused her to jump off of a building without properly fastened to her cable. The freak accident occurred in early October 2021 in Karaganda, Kazakhstan. In the disturbing footage, 33-year-old Yevgenia Leontineva is seen atop a hotel roof in preparation to partake in, quote, rope free flying, a bungee-style stunt invented in the 1990s. Off camera, a man can be heard shouting "I love you" as Leontineva, who was allegedly an experienced jumper, is strapped into a safety harness. She jumps off of the roof after a brief countdown. The daring stunt, however, goes horribly wrong as she crashes to the earth with a terrible thud, shocking bystanders, including a friend who was supposed to jump after her. Before the ill-fated jump, Leontineva and her friend posted the quotes "Live it up" and "We're going to fly" on social media. The mishap occurred when the woman was given permission to jump before the organizer could secure her safety rope to the tree. He was holding the lifeline in his hand as she took the leap. Leontineva plummeted 82 feet or 25 meters to the ground below, where she was dragged 12 feet or just under 4 meters sideways into a wall. Meanwhile, the force of her fall yanked the rope-holding organizer to the floor, which can also be seen in the unedited video. The daredevil was immediately rushed to the hospital, where she received emergency surgery and a craniotomy was performed. But sadly, Leontineva succumbed to her injuries and died. Authorities are looking into her untimely death and the extreme sports company's, quote, negligence. This wasn't the first time a bungee jumper had died due to an organizer negligence. A similar accident happened in July of that same year. A Colombian bungee jumper plummeted to her death after a communications mishap caused her to leave off of a bridge without a fastened cord. Number 9. Hippie Crack. A 16-year-old girl attended a high school party at a home in Learnington Spa, Warwickshire in August of 2022, where she had inhaled laughing gas and then lost consciousness. Parties are supposed to be a fun experience where you get to hang out with your friends and sometimes do things you'll regret later in life. But in this instance, Kaylee Burns didn't have that luxury. The young woman was from Halewood in Merseyside and apparently suffered from asthma. When she saw all of her friends participating in the illegal substance, she thought she would join in, not knowing the fatal consequences she would have. As she inhaled the laughing gas, sometimes referred to as hippie crack, she had an entirely different symptoms than everyone else at the party. She complained of feeling too hot soon after the drug entered her bloodstream and began to have an asthma attack, which later caused her to lose consciousness. The girl's 31-year-old sister Claire Baker received a message that night from one of Kaylee's pals, letting her know that she had been rushed to the hospital. Just hours after the incident, Merseyside police officers arrived at Claire's house to inform her that Kaylee had passed away. Unfortunately, the girl was only weeks away from turning 17, and the news devastated her family. After the horrific tragedy, Kaylee's relatives pleaded with the UK government to ban the drug, or at least require age restrictions for it. Number 8. Fatal cleaning products. On July 19, 2020, a woman from the UK suffered a fatal asthma attack after inhaling toxic fumes from 2 cleaning chemicals she had mixed together in order to clean her bathroom. 34-year-old Celia Seymour planned to meet up with her boss Peter Safari that fateful day to discuss some work-related matters regarding the car wash she managed in Betchworth, Surrey. Peter called Celia to let her know that he was on her way to her house, and she had let him know she was going to quickly clean her bathroom before he arrived. When he showed up 5 minutes later, he could smell the chemicals in the air and reportedly said he could feel it in his chest. The two of them went outside to chat. However, minutes later, Celia collapsed, at which point Peter began to perform CPR on the woman. She was rushed to the hospital where she was put into a medically induced coma, but she unfortunately did not recover. She died from a horrific asthma attack after inhaling the toxic fumes from the concoction she had created using bleach and another toilet cleaner on July 23rd. The woman's heartbroken mother, Julie Fellon, now warns others not to mix different cleaning chemicals together in an attempt to save other people's lives. After the tragic incident, experts also said that mixing bleach with other household cleaners can result in the release of toxic gases and should never be done in the home without proper training. Number 7. Exploding chewing gum. In December 2009, a Ukrainian chemistry student from Kyiv had his jaw blown off after he accidentally dipped his chewing gum in explosives that he mistook for citric acid. Vladimir Likonos, a 25-year-old student at the Kyiv Polytechnical Institute, apparently used citric acid to prolong the gum's taste and did it regularly. He was in his hometown of Konotov that night working on his computer when his mother heard an explosion come from behind her. When she turned around, she discovered Vladimir bleeding from his mouth on the ground. Emergency responders arrived at the house and did everything they could to save the man's life, but it just wasn't enough. Vladimir sadly died that night from his injuries. His entire jaw had reportedly been blown off, as well as most of his lower face. When police and a bomb squad investigated the scene to determine the cause of the blast, they found nearly 3.5 ounces or about 100 grams of a powder explosive that closely resembled citric acid near where the man had been sitting. Elvira Biganova, a police spokeswoman, was interviewed by the Associated Press and claimed that, quote, anyone could have mixed them up. Vladimir was known as a quiet and intelligent individual by friends and family, and he loved math and chemistry. He even made his own homemade firecrackers and hoped to be a scientist one day. He had been at home for the holidays after finishing that semester's exams and constantly was experimenting with different chemicals. This was unfortunately his downfall. Number 6. School Science Experiment. In Hendersonville, Tennessee, a science experiment gone wrong resulted in 17 students being injured in an accidental explosion on May 9, 2018. Merrillhide Magnet School was evacuated after the blast and emergency responders arrived on the scene. Chief Scotty Bush from the Hendersonville Fire Department was interviewed regarding the incident and said that there was a chemical reaction that caused, quote, a temporary flash of fire, which only lasted about 3 to 5 seconds. However, in that short amount of time, a total of 17 students, including the teacher, were injured from the explosion. The teacher and 4 of the students were taken to a nearby hospital to have their wounds treated by medical professionals. Many of those affected by the accident suffered from chemical burns, but luckily there were no fatalities reported. An investigation was opened to determine exactly what went wrong, and foul play was ruled out as a possible conclusion. The fire department later discovered that the incident was caused by mixing ethyl alcohol and boric acid, which is an odorless white substance. The accident was also determined to be unintentional, but some of the victims' families still filed complaints against the teacher who had been leading the class. Even though nobody had died in the explosion, one of the students reportedly experienced, quote, permanent disability and loss of enjoyment of life as a result of the blast. His family sought a whopping $100,000 on top of medical expenses because he soon began experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder from the ordeal. Another female student suffered extreme life-altering burns to her face, chest, and arms, and her family asked for $750,000 in relief, and another $100,000 for the mother's compensatory damages for medical bills. However, the Board of Education, who employed the science teacher, denied any negligence in the matter and aimed for both of the complaints to be dismissed. Number 5. Homemade alcohol. In August of 2021, a 63-year-old woman accidentally poisoned at least 16 house guests after serving them her homemade alcohol in Kaunas, Lithuania. The woman, who was not named in the article, apparently had been convicted in the past for trafficking in, quote, domestic alcoholic beverages and ethyl alcohol. A home search was conducted to find out the origins of the deadly liquid, and everything they found was taken in for further investigation. The victims were all in varying ages between 30 and 60 years old. Jonas Circus, a doctor of clinical toxicology from the nephrology clinic of Kaunas, stated that alcohol surrogates typically contain various types of alcohols which are used to intoxicate. However, he further explained that the use of these kinds of drinks often results in death. The most common alcohol surrogates tend to fall into 2 categories, those with ethanol and those without it, such as methanol, wood spirit, and ethylene glycol antifreeze. He also said that ethanol alcohol poisoning is usually not severe. However, if methanol or ethylene glycol are included in the mix, it's often fatal, even if they are treated in a timely manner. Circus believes that in this case, methanol was most likely the cause of the poisoning. When emergency responders arrived at the scene, the victims were all close to dying or already dead, and the woman responsible was detained on suspicion of, quote, negligent murder. 16 men and women died as a result of the incident, and those that survived are likely to experience irreversible lifelong effects, such as blindness or kidney failure. Have you ever gotten so drunk that you suffered from alcohol poisoning? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Number 4. Chemical burns. A 15-year-old student from Maple Grove Junior High School in Minnesota suffered severe second-degree burns to his hand, face, and neck after an explosion erupted in their science class in December 2011. Dane Newberger was the most seriously injured out of the 4 students who had been hurt as a result of the accident. Chaos broke out in the 9th grade classroom after a flash fire sparked as a result of a rogue flame that escaped from the bottle of methanol that it was meant to consume. Matthew Acor, the 61-year-old science teacher, profusely apologized to the student and his family for the incident. However, the Newbergers did not seek vengeance on the man and instead pushed for safety issues to be addressed by the school. Out of the 30 students present during the explosion, only 4 of them were injured and had to be treated at the hospital. Surgeons at work with Dane were hopeful that his burns would heal normally after just a couple of weeks, and he would only be left with minimal scarring. Many of the victims' parents were generally supportive of Mr. Acor and did not wish for any legal action to be brought against him. An investigation concluded that negligence was the cause of the incident. However, there were no charges filed against the school or the teacher. Number 3. DRANO. A doctor from Newport Beach, Oregon, supposedly caught his wife trying to kill him by poisoning his drinks on 3 separate occasions in 2022. Jack Chen captured his wife Emily Yu on video adding DRANO drain cleaner to his drinks on July 11th, 18th, and 25th. After he witnessed her first attempt, he began covering his morning tea with saran wrap, and she still would peel it off and add the poison to it. Apparently, Yu and the woman's mother had a history of being emotionally and physically abusive towards Chen and his 2 children. The doctor claimed that Yu's parenting style revolved around yelling, insulting, and hitting. Chen quickly filed for divorce as well as a restraining order against the woman, and Yu was arrested a day later. Before Chen knew what was going on, he began to develop symptoms like gastritis, esophagitis, and stomach ulcers. He grew suspicious of his wife after he started to notice a chemical taste in his drinks and set up the cameras in the kitchen to catch her in the act. It turns out that he was right, and after obtaining video evidence of the poisoning, he turned it into the police. Even though Yu was arrested, she was released the next day after posting $30,000 bail. She has yet to be charged with anything, but with the substantial amount of evidence in Chen's favor, it's extremely unlikely she'll walk away without a jail sentence for attempted murder. Number 2. Spa Day Catastrophe. A man from the state of Georgia was left with severe burns to his face after he visited an Atlanta spa for a chemical peel in February 2022. This was the first time Neo White had ever received this type of treatment, and in a TikTok video he posted, he described it as a horrific experience. He had visited the Diamond Faces skincare bar on multiple other occasions with no issues, but had only received milder treatments in the past. He didn't quite know what to expect going into it, but he never imagined that he would be left with extreme chemical burns to his face, which would affect him for the rest of his life. When the treatment began, he felt an intense burning sensation and immediately voiced his discomfort. However, White claims that the esthetician assured him that what he was feeling was normal. When she had finished the chemical peel, his skin was left looking a white and gray color. He was told that the acid would dry up on its own, and the rest of the chemical was not removed fully from his face. After he returned home, he began to notice several spots that continued to grow darker and darker over time. Over the next couple of days, these spots started to resemble burns, and so he sought medical treatment to reverse the effects of the chemical peel. The esthetician responsible for the incident refused to give White a refund and would not take any responsibility for the aftermath of the treatment. The man started a GoFundMe page to cover his medical expenses and trips to the hospital, as well as legal fees, since he plans to file a lawsuit in the near future. Number 1. Fireball. The family of a 6th grader from San Diego's Capri Elementary pressed charges against the school after their son suffered burn injuries to his cheeks, forehead, ears, and chest as a result of a dangerous science experiment that went horribly wrong in 2019. 13-year-old Priest Rivera was in attendance on June 13th when his teacher Lori Feinberg decided to carry out the Black Snake experiment. This involves mixing sand, sugar, and baking soda and alcohol together before lighting it on fire, which usually results in a carbon snake rising out of the mixture. However, when Miss Feinberg tried to perform this experiment that day, nothing happened. Wondering if she did add enough alcohol to the mix, she poured out more of the liquid, which resulted in an explosion that engulfed Rivera in flames. The teen's skin, hair, and clothing were caught in the blaze, and he had to be rushed to the hospital for severe burns he endured. The boy's family filed a complaint against the school district and sought an unspecified amount of damages. However, since the lawsuit was filed in December 2019, it has since been confidentially resolved, and it's unclear what the outcome was. If you were injured in a school experiment but made a full recovery, would you push for legal action against the teacher, or would you let it go but expect there to be changes in safety regulations? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Bad Badger.